The bullet that shattered Kim Tae-won's penthouse window wasn't meant to kill him, but the X-ray image glowing on the doctor's screen 6 hours later certainly would. He stared at the dark mass consuming his left lung, and for the first time in 40 years of running the biggest Korean crime organization across 3 continents, Kim Tae-won understood that some enemies couldn't be bought off or buried. Dr. Choi's voice filtered through, explaining he had 6 months, maybe 8 with treatment, but Tae-won had built his empire on the principle that weakness was death. Before I continue, if you're just coming across our channel, you're welcome. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on post notification, and also, let's know where you're watching from. I'll definitely give you a shout out in my next video. All right, let's continue. He sat alone in the consultation room thinking about his family scattered across the globe like puzzle pieces from different boxes. 5 children in 4 countries, each carrying his blood, none knowing the others existed. Park Jin-ho, his most trusted enforcer, found him an hour later still sitting in that chair. "I'm dying," Tae-won said. 6 months, maybe less. Park's face stayed blank, waiting. "And I need to tell them all the truth before it's too late." The drive back to his Seoul compound gave him time to think about James, his firstborn, the son who existed in his memory as a gap-toothed 6-year-old waving goodbye at a dusty airstrip in Sierra Leone, but who was now 38, running successful oil operations in West Africa. Tae-won had read the Forbes profile 3 times, pride and shame mixing in his chest. Because James had built something real with the money Tae-won had secretly sent. James had no idea his father was the most feared gangster in the Korean underworld. Probably still believed the story about Tae-won being a businessman who'd had to return to Korea for emergencies. His official wife Ji-eun had given him David, 28 years old and completely useless, a spoiled prince who'd nearly bankrupted their Los Angeles gambling operations through cocaine and arrogance. David was everything Tae-won hated, weak and entitled, but he was the son everyone expected would inherit. The Brazilian twins lived in a different world entirely. Isabella and Gabriela, 25, born to Lucia, a prosecutor he'd seduced 12 years ago during business expansion into São Paulo. She'd abandoned her career investigating his money laundering to become his mistress, and he'd set her up in luxury while their daughters grew brilliant. Isabella became a lawyer specializing in corporate law, while Gabriela turned into a financial genius at McKinsey before Tae-won quietly arranged for her to join one of his companies. Then there was Min-ji, 32, his daughter with Yoon-hee, his second wife in a Buddhist ceremony that had no legal standing. Min-ji managed his real estate empire efficiently, believing she was the secret daughter who'd someday be acknowledged, working twice as hard to prove she deserved a place. And Sophie, 22, studying finance in Paris, daughter of Lin, a French-Vietnamese woman he'd met at a Hong Kong banking conference. Lin had raised Sophie believing her father was just a busy entrepreneur, but the investigators Tae-won paid to watch over her reported that Sophie had been making secret trips to Seoul, meeting people whose identities they couldn't confirm. 5 children, 3 wives of varying legitimacy, 1 woman he'd abandoned, 1 he'd corrupted, each believing they were the only one. Tae-won had maintained this deception through careful separation and loyal subordinates who knew pieces but never the whole picture. But the tumor forced a reckoning. Park waited as Tae-won poured Japanese whiskey older than his children. "I need you to understand something," Tae-won began. "I have 5 children, not 1. 5 children from 4 different women across 3 continents, and none of them know about each other. I need to bring them all here to Seoul before I die because what I've built is too complex for one person to inherit." Park's face showed surprise, confusion, then something like admiration or horror. "You want to bring them all here? Together?" "Not together at first," Tae-won said. "We tell each family I'm restructuring business interests, discussing inheritance. We house them in different hotels, schedule separate meetings. Then when the moment is right, we bring them together and I tell them the truth." "They'll tear each other apart," Park said. "The mothers will go insane. The children will feel betrayed and our rivals will strike. You'll be dead in 6 months anyway, why not just pick one?" Taewon shook his head. James succeeded without me and built something real. The twins are brilliant in ways David will never be. Minji runs operations better than half my team. Sophie has connections in European finance we've never accessed. Each has something unique, and together they might be extraordinary. You're gambling they won't kill each other. I'm gambling that the truth is less dangerous than the lie, Taewon said, because the lie will unravel when I die anyway. This way I control the revelation. The invitations went out carefully crafted for each recipient. Ji-eun and David received notice about formalizing David's role. James got a business opportunity for Asian market expansion. The twins heard about strategy sessions for increased company roles. Minji was told about a major real estate acquisition. Sophie learned about post-graduation career opportunities in Asian finance. The arrivals began on Monday. Ji-eun and David flew from Los Angeles, exhausted but excited about what they assumed was David's coronation. Taewon installed them at the Shilla Hotel with instructions to rest 2 days before meetings. James arrived Tuesday from Freetown, and Taewon felt his chest tighten seeing his firstborn after 32 years. A grown man now, tall and broad, with eyes that were Taewon's eyes, sharp and calculating. They shook hands in the VIP lounge, strangely businesslike, and Taewon realized James had made peace with his absence long ago. James went to the Grand Hyatt across the city. Lucia and the twins arrived Wednesday from São Paulo. Over private dinner, Isabella questioned him about legal frameworks, while Gabriela analyzed economic implications with detailed understanding. Lucia watched him with eyes that saw too much, and he wondered if she'd guessed the real reason for the summons. Yoonhee and Minji came from their Seoul apartment, Minji carrying blueprints and demanding to know about the acquisition. Yoonhee watched Taewon quietly, waiting after 32 years for him to finally make their relationship public. Sophie and Lin flew in Saturday. Sophie chattered about her thesis and job prospects while Taewon listened carefully, memorizing details he might never hear again. Lin studied him with concern, noting his weight loss, and he deflected with lies about stress. By Sunday evening, all were in Seoul, scattered across luxury hotels, unaware of each other. Taewon felt like a general before battle, except the enemy was truth and casualties would be trust. Monday afternoon, the conference room was ready. He'd arranged families to arrive at 15-minute intervals, each shown to separate waiting rooms on different floors. Ji-eun and David came first, impatient. James arrived alone. Lucia and the twins came exactly on time. Minji arrived early with documentation. Sophie bounced in excited. At 12:15, Park signaled everyone was ready. Taewon walked to the conference room on shaking legs and sat at the head of a long table surrounded by 16 empty chairs. He had Park bring them all in at once. Confusion showed on every face as they entered and saw each other. Ji-eun clutched David's arm, scanning the other women with growing panic. James entered alert, recognizing threat. The twins whispered in Portuguese, trying to solve the puzzle. Minji went pale, staring at Ji-eun, then Lucia, then Lin, over understanding what these women meant. Sophie looked curious, asking Lin in French who everyone was. Taewon stood. The room fell silent. "Thank you for coming," he began in Korean, Park translating. "I know you're confused. What I'm about to tell you will be shocking and painful, but I'm dying and have 6 months at most and cannot leave this world without you knowing the truth about who you are and who each other are." He watched comprehension dawn at different speeds. Minji and Lin got it first. Lucia second, hand flying to her mouth. The twins third, Ji-eun fourth, strangling a wail. David and Sophie still confused, James just watching and waiting. "You are all my children," Taewon said, looking at each. "James, David, Isabella, Gabriela, Minji, Sophie, you are brothers and sisters, and none of you knew because I kept you separate. Kept your mothers separate, built walls between different parts of my life." He turned to the mothers. "I have 3 wives, if you can call them that. Ji-eun legally, Yoonhee by ceremony, and I never married Lucia or Lin at all. I abandoned James's mother 40 years ago in Sierra Leone with money but no explanation." David found his voice first, standing, face red. This is insane! Why would you do this? I'm your real son, your legitimate heir. James stood calmly, more frightening than David's rage. You should sit down, James said quietly, British accented, because whatever you say about the rest of us applies to you too. David sat, and James turned to Taewon. How long have you been planning this? A week for the diagnosis, 40 years for the reveal. I always knew this moment would come. Isabella stood, organizing her thoughts like a lawyer. What exactly is your goal? What do you expect us to do with this information? My goal is to give you choice, Taewon said. Choice to know the truth, to decide whether you want to be family or strangers, to determine whether what I've built can be inherited collectively or needs division. Empire? Gabriella said softly but sharply. What do you really do? What is this empire built on? The moment Taewon had dreaded. I run the Baekdu Syndicate, he said simply, the largest Korean organized crime organization internationally. Money laundering, gambling, protection, and yes, legitimate oil, real estate, import-export that clean the illegal money. I've killed or ordered killed 47 people. Every luxury you've enjoyed was funded by criminal enterprises. Silence. Ji-eun sobbed. His children processed this revelation, reorganizing their entire understanding of their lives. Minji spoke quietly. The real estate I managed, was it legitimate? Some. Seoul's financial district was clean. Busan and Gangnam were bought with laundered gambling money. The oil company you helped me build, James said, started with laundered diamond money from the 90s, but your expansion was entirely yours, clean as far as I know. The holding company I work for, Gabriella said. 80% mine through subsidiaries. I wanted you close. David recovered enough to speak bitterly. So we're just different investments in your criminal empire? Baskets for a gangster's illegitimate eggs? That's one interpretation, Taewon acknowledged. Another is I'm a man who built something vast, who had relationships across the world, who created life carelessly but loved each of you in whatever broken way I could, and who's now trying to give you information to make choices about your futures. What choices? Minji demanded. You've revealed my entire life is a lie. You can choose to walk away, Taewon said. All of you. I'll set up clean trusts, enough money to live comfortably without touching the organization. Or you can choose to take what I've built and make it yours together, combining your strengths into something greater than I achieved alone. You want us to form a family crime syndicate? Isabella's voice dripped sarcasm. I'm suggesting each of you has skills I don't, Taewon said carefully. James understands African markets. David knows American street operations. Isabella, you're a lawyer specializing in corporate structures. Gabriella, your economic analyses are sophisticated. Minji, you've managed complex portfolios. Sophie, your European finance connections could open new markets. Separately, you're competent. Together, you could be extraordinary. You're insane, David said. They're not my family. Mother, we're leaving. He pulled Ji-eun toward the door. Park stepped in front of it. David's face flushed. Is this kidnapping now? You're free to leave, Taewon said, nodding to Park to step aside. All of you, but if you leave now, you leave with only questions. I'm asking 3 days. Stay in Seoul, think about what I've told you, meet with each other if you want, then we'll meet again and you can tell me your decisions. 3 days? Lucia spoke sharply. 3 days to process that my entire relationship was a lie? I know it's inadequate, Taewon acknowledged. But I have 6 months if I'm lucky, and I need to know what happens when I die. James had been quiet. When he spoke, everyone listened. I have questions about the specifics of this empire, the legal exposure, the enemies, the obligations. Will you answer honestly? I'll answer anything, Taewon promised. Park has comprehensive briefings on every operation. Nothing is hidden anymore. Then I'll stay 3 days, James decided. Not because I've forgiven you, but because I need to understand the full scope before making informed decisions. The twins conferred in Portuguese before Isabella spoke. We'll stay, but make no commitments beyond listening. If we determine association poses legal risks we can't manage, we'll walk away with the clean trusts. Minji looked at Yoon-hee, then nodded. 3 days, but I want separate meetings with each sibling. If we're supposed to work together, I need to understand who they are. Lin held crying Sophie. We'll stay, but Sophie meets with a therapist I choose before more revelations. This is trauma. David struggled with pride and pragmatism. Ji-eun whispered something that made his jaw clench. Fine, 3 days, but I'm not promising anything. It was already destroyed, Taewon said quietly. I destroyed it 40 years ago. All I'm doing is making the destruction visible so maybe something new can be built from the ruins. Over the next 3 days, something unexpected happened. The children began meeting without him. James reached out to Minji the first evening, talking 4 hours about real estate opportunities in Nigeria, combining expertise in ways that suggested actual business synergy. The twins met Sophie the next morning, touring Seoul together, becoming friends. On Sophie's Instagram, filled with photos of the 3 sisters. David eventually agreed to meet James after Minji told him he needed to understand what other leaders brought to the table. David tried aggressive posturing, but James waited him out with patient confidence, and David eventually backed down and listened. Isabella and Gabriella asked for comprehensive briefings on the organization's structure. Taewon spent 6 hours walking them through every operation. Isabella took notes like preparing a legal case while Gabriella built financial models. This is actually well designed, Gabriella admitted reluctantly. Inefficient where you prioritized security over profit, but sophisticated. Legal exposure is significant but manageable, Isabella added. Assuming you divest certain operations, the Macau gambling operations are liability bombs. Yes, but the real estate and oil holdings could be converted to legitimate enterprises over 5 to 10 years. On the 3rd day, all 5 children asked to meet him together without their mothers. James positioned himself in the middle rather than the head of the table. We've talked, James began, and we have a proposal, though calling it a proposal is generous since you're dying and we're the ones living with consequences. First, the non-negotiables, Isabella said. David remains in charge of American operations, but with supervision. Gabriella audits financials quarterly, and James reviews major decisions. David keeps his role, but must prove he can handle it. David looked like he'd object, but Minji cut him off. You're a liability unless you get serious. Take it or walk away with a trust. Second, Gabriella continued, we create a legitimate holding company that slowly acquires criminal enterprises and converts them over 10 years. Isabella designs the legal framework, I handle financial engineering, Minji manages real estate assets. Third, Sophie added, gaining confidence, we establish European operations using my Paris connections, legitimate investment banking that helps clean money during transition. I'll run it with Gabriella's oversight. Fourth, James said, I maintain African operations as semi-independent, but explore integration with Minji's property management for legitimate real estate development in Lagos, Accra, Johannesburg. They outlined a vision far more sophisticated than anything Taewon had imagined, transforming the Baekdu syndicate into a diversified international conglomerate. And leadership? He asked. The siblings looked at each other. We operate as a council, James said. 5 equal votes on major decisions, unanimous consent for significant changes, majority vote for operations, no single leader, just 5 people with different expertise consulting each other. That's insane, Taewon said. Councils are slow, consensus is inefficient. Like your leadership style that created 5 separate families? Minji asked sharply. Maybe collective decision-making will work better. And if it doesn't work? Then we fail, Isabella said simply. We fail together as siblings rather than succeeding separately as strangers. After 3 days of knowing each other, I'd rather risk failure with them. The others nodded, even David. Taewon felt something warm and painful in his chest. You've built something I never could because I was too afraid to trust anyone. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're creating something better. It's yours now, your vision, and I'll support it however I can. One more condition, Sophie said quietly. You tell our mothers the same truth and apologize to them, really apologize for choices that hurt them for decades. Taewon nodded. I'll speak with each today. The meetings with the mothers were as difficult as anticipated. Ji-eun raged and wept before collapsing into exhausted acceptance. Yoon-hee listened in stony silence before asking if he'd ever actually loved her. And he told her the truth. He'd loved her as much as he was capable, which wasn't enough. Lucia laughed bitterly at the council structure, then admitted it was exactly what the twins would propose. Lin listened without interruption before saying in French, "You were always going to destroy everything you touched, but maybe your children inherited better natures from their mothers." Over following weeks as Taewon's cancer progressed, he watched his children build the framework. They moved to Seoul, renting apartments near each other, creating proximity that made collaboration easier. They hired lawyers specializing in corporate restructuring, accountants understanding international tax, security consultants transitioning enforcement into legitimate services. They fought, especially David and James clashing over philosophy, but always came back to the table. The mothers formed their own alliance, meeting for weekly dinners, processing their shared trauma. Ji-eun and Yoon-hee's relationship was particularly difficult, but Minji and David's sibling bond helped. 3 months after the revelation, the council structure was formalized through complex holding companies Isabella designed. The Baekdu syndicate began transforming, criminal operations carefully wound down or converted, money redirected through sophisticated schemes Gabriella insisted were temporary. Then Taiwan's rivals, the Sang-Yong triad, learned about the succession chaos and attacked a gambling operation in Busan. Before Taiwan could respond, Park's phone rang. "It's James. He says they're handling it." Over 12 hours, Taewon watched his children execute a response, surpassing anything he could have orchestrated. James coordinated overall strategy using African contacts to bring mercenary contractors. David identified Sang-Yong safe houses in Los Angeles using street connections. Isabella and Gabriella froze their financial assets through legal maneuvers and bank pressure. Minji secured Seoul properties. Sophie leaked information to European regulators exposing their money laundering. The coordination was perfect, each sibling operating in their expertise but constantly communicating. The attack became a demonstration of the new structure's strength. When Sang-Yong leadership negotiated ceasefire 3 days later, they talked to the council, all 5 siblings presenting a united front. Taiwan watched from his bed, too weak to sit in a chair, and felt relief. They didn't need him anymore. Park found him crying after the ceasefire. "I thought I'd die knowing I'd destroyed everything," Taewon said. "But they're better than me. And maybe that's the only real legacy. Not what I built, but what they're building from the pieces of what I broke." "They're your children," Park said. "They inherited your intelligence and strategy, but also their mother's capacity for collaboration. That combination makes them formidable in ways you never were." Taewon died 4 months later, with all 5 children present, their mothers in an adjacent room, Park at the door. His last words were an incomplete apology, but they seemed to understand. James held one hand while Minji held the other. The funeral brought together legitimate business people and criminal figures. The 5 siblings stood together receiving condolences, presenting a united front that made everyone reassess the syndicate's future. A year later, the transition was nearly complete. Baekdu Holdings was a diversified international conglomerate with legitimate interests. Criminal operations hadn't disappeared completely but were reduced to a small percentage, carefully compartmentalized. James ran the African division from Lagos. David had gotten sober and ran American entertainment, turning gambling fronts into legitimate nightclubs. The twins created São Paulo headquarters managing Latin America. Minji remained in Seoul managing Asian real estate. Sophie built European investment banking in Paris. The council worked better than predicted because they'd learned to value disagreements as better decision-making rather than threats. They met quarterly in person and monthly by video. 2 years after Taiwan's death, Ji-eun and Yoon-hee had developed something resembling friendship. Lucia wrote a best-selling memoir about a mysterious criminal that got optioned by Netflix. Lin moved to Seoul and started consulting on international banking regulations. 3 years later, Forbes profiled Baekdu Holdings as one of Asia's fastest-growing family enterprises with a cover photo of all 5 siblings. The article marveled at how the children of a deceased oil tycoon had transformed their inheritance. Nobody mentioned the criminal origins or multiple marriages, and the siblings let the myth stand because the truth was theirs alone. 4 years later, David called an emergency council meeting to announce he was getting married to his addiction counselor. He wanted his siblings' approval before proposing because he'd learned decisions made in isolation were mistakes. They attended the wedding in Los Angeles, where David cried through his vows, and his siblings cried watching him become someone their father never believed he could be. 5 years after Taewon's death, James stood in their Lagos headquarters looking at a contract for renewable energy, solar farms across West Africa generating clean power and cleaner money, a final transition from extractive industries that built the original empire. "What do you think he'd say about this?" Sophie asked, having flown from Paris for the signing. "He'd probably tell us we're being too cautious, moving too slowly," James said. "But he'd also be proud that we're doing it our way, that we didn't just inherit his empire but transformed it into something reflecting who we are rather than who he was." They signed the contract together, 5 signatures where there might have been one, bound by blood and trauma, and the strange gift their father had given them in his final months, the gift of truth and choice and each other. That's all for now. Kindly subscribe to the channel. Can I know where you're watching from? Stay tuned. I'll catch up with you in our next video.